morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning.
Or good afternoon. Still morning for me. My name is Elizabeth Simas, currently serving as your Vice Mayor and liaison for the City Council to the Mayor's Military Affairs Commission. I evidently get my own salute. We are here today with the Military Affairs Commission and the city hosting this very solemn tribute on this 11th day of the 11th month and a little later than the 11th hour, the 100th year anniversary of Armistice Day. We're so glad you could come, and at this time we'd like everyone to please stand for the posting of the colors by the Sheriff, Police, and Fire Honor Guard. Present the colors.
Honor guard. Out. Honor guard. Left. Right. Honor guard. Breathe in. Out. Honor guard. Ready? Eight. Honor guard. Eight. Eight. Forward. Out. Left. 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 Left.
Please be seated. At this time, I'd like to welcome a few special guests in the audience. Of course, our Mayor, John Rowe, who you will hear from shortly. A delegate for the 79th District, Steve Heretic, is here. From the City Council, we have Councilman Bill Moody, Councilwoman Lisa Lucas-Burke, Councilman Nathan Clark, and Councilman-elect Shannon Glover. Welcome to all of you. We also have from the City of Portsmouth our elected sheriff. Sheriff Moore is in the back. We have our police chief, Tanya Chapman, and some of her staff, and we have fire chief is hiding in the back, Jim Hoffler. We also have sitting up front our city manager, Dr. Lydia Pettis-Patton, our city attorney, Solomon Ashby, and of course our deputy city manager, LaVoris Pace, who we couldn't make any of these types of events happen without. Oh, and our city assessor, Billy Budd. I'm so sorry. At this time, I'd like all the veterans to please stand because you are the special guests here. And now we'll hear from Mayor Rowe.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Elizabeth. And thank you all for coming out and helping us to celebrate this special day, which is a combination day, Veterans Day and Armistice Day, where we're celebrating today the 100th anniversary of the end of hostilities of World War I. And I want you to think about that war. 70 million combatants were in that war. Nearly 15 million people lost their lives, total civilians and military. And so as we think about that, think about those people who fought for justice and freedom prevailed. And to our veterans, and I'm proud to be serving with Bill Moody, who's a Air Force veteran, Nate Clark, who's a Army veteran, and soon to be council person Shannon Glover, who's a Navy veteran. My hat's off to you, and thank you for not ending your service with your military career, but continuing to serve our great city. Veterans Day. You know what it means. You know what it means to serve. And thank you, veterans. Thank you for your service. Thank you to our great country. And thank you all for coming here.
At this time, we'd like everyone to stand for the laying of the memorial wreath, and our wonderful Tidewater Consort Band will be playing America the Beautiful. Thank you so much. Please be seated.
Well, it's my great honor to introduce our speaker, Rear Admiral retired United States Navy Mark Hugel. And his wife, Luana, is here. And would you, oh, there she is. Mark had told Irv Lindley, who, by the way, Irv, thank you for your service and to your service as chair of the Military Affairs Committee. Mark had told Irv, make sure that John doesn't make an introduction that's longer than my speech. So let me say this. You don't become an admiral in the United States Navy unless you're really, really good. The cream rises. Mark grew up in Ohio. He went to the Naval Academy and graduated in 1977. And this shows you how good he is. He entered the Navy's nuclear power program, where only the best of the best go. Mark had many commands, but what I think is the most important command is the commanding officer of my daddy's shipyard, the Norfolk Naval Shipyard here in Portsmouth, Virginia, from 2000 to 2003. Mark, in addition to graduating from the Naval Academy, has two master's degrees from MIT. That's pretty awesome. And Mark is currently a vice president with CACI, which is a defense industry business that does a multitude of things for our country. And so, let me finally say this, that the Hugels have had a relationship with Portsmouth since 1986. And when they retired from the Navy, I almost said Army. When they retired from the Navy in 2009, guess where they came? They came back to Portsmouth. So, it's my great pleasure to introduce to you Rear Admiral Mark Hugel.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Well, good afternoon. So, Mayor Roy, I appreciate that you followed Irv's direction. I'll only have to extend my remarks about 2 minutes longer than I had intended. So I'm going to change the mood a little bit. So Elizabeth started off saying today is a somber day. Actually, today is a happy day. Today is a day of Thanksgiving. So as we enter this time of Thanksgiving, today's a day where we give thanks for the folks who served and lived through it, as well as the folks who served and gave the full eternal measure. We have another day to celebrate and recognize in a very somber way the folks who didn't come home. That day is Memorial Day, and Memorial Day actually has been celebrated much longer in the United States than Veterans Day, than Armistice Day. Memorial Day was started actually in 1868 as a remembrance of the folks who perished in the war between the states. That day, which Portsmouth has celebrated now for 134 consecutive years with a parade, that day is the day that we remember those who served and died in their service. A somber day. In fact, as we celebrate during that parade, I'm often conflicted between the bands and the dancers and the floats and the parade and the veterans that we recognize during that parade, because it's intended to be a somber remembrance. In fact, Memorial Day was originally called Decoration Day, with the intent to decorate the graves of those who perished. So that day is a somber day. Today is a happy day. Today's a day of Thanksgiving. And I want to draw that distinction because there are a lot of veterans here in the crowd. So all of us who served have made some sacrifice. We fortunately didn't make the supreme sacrifice. We lived through our experience. But part of the sacrifice, probably for each of us, is reflecting back on those we served with who didn't make it, who didn't survive that experience. And so it's part of the sacrifice that comes with service. That sacrifice ranges from those really difficult sacrifices to the kids' soccer game that we couldn't get to because we had work to perform. The whole gamut, the time spent away from home, the time spent away from loved ones, all part of the sacrifice that all of us veterans made. But Veterans Day actually started as Armistice Day. That is a mouthful. Armistice Day started in 1919 by President Wilson in recognition of the Americans and the Allied servicemen who served and perished during World War I. In fact, today is Remembrance Day in France, Remembrance Day in Great Britain, Remembrance Day in Canada and Australia and New Zealand. You see, those countries entered World War I from the very outset in 1914. And to put their sacrifice in perspective, We lost about 600 to 700,000 American citizens during the war between the states. It's the most killed in any war that Americans have fought in. During World War I, the French lost double that number. 1.4 million French were killed during World War I, and so it's fitting in their case to spend today, the 100th anniversary of the armistice of World War I, reflecting back on the 1.4 million lives that were lost. Almost an entire generation of French that were killed. In fact, the French had many fewer killed in World War II than they had in World War I because so many of their young men were killed during that first Great War. So they're doing a Remembrance Day today, but today is our day to celebrate, our day to remember and give thanks to our veterans. Now, one of the other symbols that has come to reflect what Armistice Day and Veterans Day means in this country, but really across the world, is the symbol of the red poppy. In fact, a good friend is in the audience today. He was out handing out red poppies yesterday as a member of a veterans group in remembrance of Veterans Day. So what's this symbolism embodied in the red poppy? Well, it actually all goes back to 1915. In the middle of World War I, there was a Canadian medical officer. His name was John McCrae. And John had just lost several friends on the battlefield in Flanders. Now, Flanders is an area in the very northeastern corner of France. And Flanders became known as the Western Front. So where the trenches were dug, where the modern implements of war, the machine gun, the tank, the airplane, and poison gas were all implemented during World War I, Flanders was the scene on the Western Front where the standoff occurred, where the troops dug into the trenches and created no man's land between those trenches with the machine guns and the tanks and those new implements of war. And so John McCrae, this Canadian surgeon, was also a poet. And John McCrae, Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae, is credited with the poem In Flanders Fields. And so I want to share that with you as a way to connect to that symbol of World War I, the red poppy. In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses row on row that mark our place. And in the sky the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If you break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. And so the encouragement from John McCrae's poem is an encouragement from the dead to all of us who live, to remember, to celebrate, not only celebrate their memory, not only celebrate their sacrifice, but also to celebrate the sacrifice of the living. And so that's why we gather here today, to celebrate the sacrifice of the living. And there are many living veterans. Somewhere between 22 and 23 million Americans are counted amongst the living veterans today. In World War II, there were in World War I, there were 4.7 million Americans who served. Probably no World War I veterans in the crowd. In World War II, 16 million Americans served. Are there any World War II veterans in the crowd? If you're here, please stand. In Korea, 5.7 million Americans served. Are there any veterans in the crowd from Korea? Please stand and be recognized. The Vietnam conflict, there were 8.7 million Americans who served. If you're a Vietnam vet, please stand. So our Vietnam vets are probably the least appreciated and certainly the least thanked. And so it's important, I think, that at every opportunity we thank the Vietnam veterans for the thanks that they didn't receive when they came home. In Desert Storm, 2.3 million Americans served. If you're a veteran of Desert Storm, please stand. And since September the 11th, 2001, there have been 3.5 million additional Americans served. If you're a veteran since September the 11th, 2001, please stand. And so there you have it, folks, a reason for us to gather today and a reason for us to celebrate all of those people who stood, our fellow citizens of our community, a community that embraces veterans, a community that embraces the military. In fact, a community that's fabric is interwoven with the military, bookended here along the waterfront by the shipyard and by the Naval Hospital. And so for a community who is so close to the military, it's fitting and appropriate, I think, that we spend the day to pause and to give thanks as we roll into this season of Thanksgiving. So as you're enjoying your turkeys and your cranberry, please remember the sacrifices that all veterans have made, those who gave some and those who gave all. Thanks so much, and God bless.
Thank you so much, Admiral Hugel. That was wonderful. At this time, we're going to be entertained for a few minutes by our wonderful Tidewater Concert Band. Tidewater Concert Band. The program says closing remarks. I only brought about 30 minutes worth, but we'll dispense with those. And I will call your attention before you leave today to the sign behind me of the names of all the gentlemen, and of course at that time it was only men, who perished in World War I who were from Portsmouth. It's a reminder of those times 100 years ago. I wish you well. Thank you all for your service, and have a good day.